this is a terrible virus all over the world. Officially, something like 600,000 people have been killed by it, but we know the figure is much, much larger than this in China and India and so on. And many poorer countries than that, they haven't been able to test people. People die at home from pneumonia. It's actually a COVID death. What happened in New York, New Jersey, Boston, there's no reason that wouldn't happen in Australia. We don't have some divine gift from God which makes it impossible. As the months have gone on, we've got a few treatments which cut the fatality rate a bit, so that's good. And we've got a well-prepared hospital system. But 317 cases today, almost all of them unexplained in their sources. Does the Victorian government really have enough people to trace all their contacts? This disease increases exponentially. We're already seeing the hospital system express its first sign of being a bit worried about being overtaxed. This could get right out of hand. And of course, if it does get out of hand, your death rate goes up massively as well. Because if you can't treat people comprehensively in intensive care units, they're much more likely to die. We think about 20% of people who get the infection end up going to hospital. We know in Britain and the United States, hundreds and hundreds of health workers have died, nurses, doctors, and so on. This is a very serious business.
We know today too a number of health workers have contracted the virus. We know that 2 hospitals, St Vincent's, those in Melbourne, know that's a very big cardiac hospital. And we also know the Royal Children's Hospital have had to have deep cleans because of connections to the virus. So it's real. There's a lot of talk about herd immunity, that we should sort of let this disease rip. Notwithstanding, obviously, to go to a total, absolute hard lockdown has an economic consequence. There's a big consequence with herd immunity. You wrote about that today too, didn't you?
Yes, so herd immunity is essentially a fiction. It's a silliness, really. I spoke to Greg Hunt, the health minister, and also Professor Raina McIntyre, one of our most distinguished epidemiologists who's spent her whole life studying this. Now, herd immunity would require 60% of Australians to be infected. That's about 15 million people. And if the death rate is 1%, that's 150,000 deaths. Nobody is going to tolerate that. It's also pretty clear that you don't get lifetime immunity from this disease even after you've had it. So you might kill 150,000 Australians to get herd immunity and then find that next year you're back to square one. This is an insane argument we're having here, really, and nowhere in the world has achieved herd immunity. What you've seen with the virus is that it's behaving exactly as pre-vaccination pandemics behaved. You get a terrible outbreak, a lot of deaths, everybody takes the distancing measures, the virus is burnt out for a little while in that location, life returns to normal, and then it comes back, maybe 3 months later, maybe 6 months later, maybe 12 months later. We know the Spanish flu killed many more people in its second iteration than it did in its first iteration. So herd immunity is just a nonsense. You can't get there. At the same time, obviously, you don't want to go to total lockdown trying to get total eradication, because that's pretty damaging to it's very, very damaging to the economy. So we just have to use all the measures we've got at hand: masks in public transport, constant hand washing, social distancing, working at home where we can, all of that until the vaccine comes along. The vaccine won't be perfect, but it will certainly help a great deal.
I guess the frustration in all of this is that once we got the immediate cases inside Australia suppressed and shut the borders, the only time cases were starting up were the imported cases we had of Australians returning home. Now, I don't have any issue with Australians returning home, provided they went through hotel quarantine. That wasn't there from the start either. When that came into place and it was routine, it made a huge difference to our numbers. Now, we all patted ourselves on the back there a few months ago, but what we were dealing with was imported cases. Now we've got it in the community. It's a very, very different beast. How confident are you that the Victorian government, with the resources that it's got here, and obviously these systemic failures that we're seeing in this state and no other, how confident are you, Greg, that they can get this under control? Because, so just sort of jumping in, because immunologists are telling me it will be a finely run thing. Some say, you know, it's gone too far already.
Well, I think it is very challenging. It's very, very challenging. No one has been more critical than me of the failures of the Andrews government here. The mismanagement of the quarantine hotels was an absolute shocking failure of basic government competence. This is not rhetorical. This is not left or right. If you can't run a quarantine hotel in the midst of a global pandemic, which you've identified as the greatest threat to Australian health since World War II, then you are an incompetent government and you deserve every political retribution that comes your way. However, that doesn't help us. Where do we go from here? I think Victoria's capacity has been poor and they've been slow to accept federal assistance. It's good now that their tracing capacity, which is another area where they've been fairly poor, is being bolstered by folks from the Australian Defence Force. It's a huge number of cases to deal with. And if it gets totally out of control, we'll get it under control eventually, but that would then require a massive and sustained lockdown. And there simply will be no alternative, because if thousands and thousands and thousands of Australians are getting affected, and then tens and then hundreds and then thousands are dying, it won't be up to government. The public will demand it. So you've seen in the United States, even in the most pro-opening up states in the United States, they're going back to shutdowns and limited shutdowns and so on because their case numbers are too high. Now, I think we've got a good chance. I think we've got a good chance with this, but, you know, that depends on how everybody goes. I do think government, state and federal have been weirdly reluctant to recommend masks. I think when you go on public transport or you go into a shopping centre... That's often remarked
upon, Greg. Yeah, that's often remarked upon from the get-go. I think people were happy enough to wear them if they were told it was necessary. And we've been sort of half pregnant on the issue of masks. Clearly in Victoria we're not anymore, but I think they're going to be appearing in Sydney and other places soon. I've got to leave it there, but Greg Sheridan, thank you very much for your time tonight. Great article, and I'll put it on my Facebook page.
She says the foundation was put wrong. She's got to take it down. I told her that the barracks at the fucking Hotel Europa. Fucking bitch engineer. You fucking bitch!
Herr Kommandant, the entire foundation has to be torn down and repoured. If not, there will be at least a subsidence at the southern end of the barracks. Subsidence and then collapse.
You are an engineer?
Yes. My name is Diana Reiter. I'm a graduate of civil engineering from the University of Milan.
Oh, I'm educated too, like Karl Marx himself. Unterscharführer.
Jawohl.
Shoot her.
Herr Kommandant! I'm only trying to do my job.
Yeah, I'm doing mine.
Sir, she's foreman of construction.
We're not going to have arguments with these people.
Well,
Oh, shoot her! Here, on my authority.
It will take more than that.
I'm sure you're right.